today's focus around embedding and enabling circular economy, we're now going to do a deeper dive into scaling up circular economy solutions. We've got three, I think, really fascinating perspectives on this. We've got the perspective of the major corporate, so Dede from BT. We've got the perspective of an innovator, Steve from circular computing, and then we've got the money, the major funders of breakthrough technology, Innovate UK. So I think it's going to be fascinating. I'll just do a bit more of an introduction. So Amy is a chemical engineer, has a deep background in industrial sustainability, and leads the work at Innovate UK around life cycle and circular economy innovations. So Dede at BT, where you're leading the work to create a sustainable network, which is actually a fairly massive undertaking, which I look forward to hearing more about, which requires an extraordinary level of collaboration to make that work. And Steve, I don't know if you followed Steve, but a true pioneer of circular economy solutions in circular computing. I think we've been connected for about 10 years now, and so it's a great example of just how bloody hard it is to scale innovation in this area. So that's who we're going to hear from. So why am I having the opportunity to chair this? So I represent Sustainable Ventures. We're in effect building an ecosystem of climate technology innovation. We invest in early stage companies. We build and operate innovation hubs in cities across the UK, and we provide support programs to founders in the innovation community. We launched the National Climate Tech Accelerator Program in November of last year. We targeted 200 companies for the program. We got to 312. We shut the door at 312, sort of snuck in. So we're building this quite scaled support infrastructure for innovation. And just sort of three of the companies that we invested in over the last, I think it's probably the last 6 to 12 months, that really should be in the room, actually. There's a company called Rookwood Technologies. They're basically extracting phosphate out of rivers and then selling it back to farmers through some fairly clever advanced materials that they've developed. Another business, Infinity Recycling, are extracting anode and cathode metals from waste streams and selling that back into the to the battery industry. And another one called Forge Minerals, and what they do is they basically extract CO2 from the atmosphere, create magnesium carbonate, and then they sell that back into the industry. So we've got skin in the game in this circular innovation and experience of how hard it is at that early stage to scale this up. But that's kind of enough from me. Let's hear from the panel, and maybe start with you, Dede, if that's all right. So this sort of massive scale copper extraction, what's all of that, and how have you been able to go from the kind of the piloting of that stuff into the scaled up extraction was?
I predicting. When it comes to copper, I'll just cut to the chase. It has to go. It's been sitting in our network for definitely at least half a century or more. It's operationally, it was starting to cost us a lot of money, buckling under the pressure of whether that be heat, issues with accessing it, flooding, etc. So it had to leave the network, and it wasn't fit for the next gen of all the connectivity that you want, and you will be holograms soon, and preparing for that real digital step in our development. How did we scale it? If I'm very honest with you, the economics just makes sense. As soon as people realized that, that the effort and the processing that went into getting raw material was, double at least than what it takes to do urban mining that was referred to earlier. And we are across, I was saying to a few people earlier, we are pretty much across every town and city in the UK, a footprint of about 5,000 plus venues where we're present in the UK. That will be shrinking between now and 2040. But in the meantime, that's a hell of a lot of copper. So the economics just made sense. Everything came together. The infrastructure is there in terms of the recycling of it. There's no shortage of people either coming to buy it from us as Openreach, which you'll see, Openreach is part of our group, has pretty much sold ahead of the market, almost like a farmer selling the wheat before the harvest. So we've sold a lot of copper. We still have a lot to go in the network. So hopefully if we're selling it into the circular economy, that's being processed, or people steal it from us, if I'm very honest. It's just so lucrative that we're getting hacked and chopped. So yeah, the economics came into play, the infrastructure came into play. It's a win-win for us, if I'm honest. That's how it's going.
Just about this saying, it's a new phrase, IoT. It's all about handling scale technology we got that. So if I would cherry that.
Okay, really happy that you actually asked about that. I mentioned it to somebody earlier. So the bioleaching, I have to say, didn't come from us directly. It came from one of our partners, and this was one of the things I was going to say, the importance of partnerships and universities. So people just like yourself. So I believe our partner was working with Coventry University, and there are other universities that have looked into this. But essentially, we have so much legacy, being 175 plus. So really proud that we're still here, we're still innovating. So we have a lot to take out. And what we found out was a lot of the materials that went into building that legacy, all the way from the telegraph poles and your dial-up phones, if you remember, contain just a lot of precious metals. So we're sitting on a lot of gold, we're sitting on copper, we're sitting on silver, we're sitting on so much. I can pretty much put out the periodic tables. And we realized that we were making money from recycling this stuff, and people were coming into our exchanges and going, oh my god, do you know how much gold is in that? And I was thinking, so am I going to check my pockets on the way out?
Francis and the mining.
There's literally stuff that's 54 years old and stashed with gold. I mean, it's incredible. We sold the BT tower there, so you can imagine what mining is going to come out of that. But we weren't getting the most out of it, right? The processing itself leaks some of that material. So thanks to our partners and wonderful academics like yourself, they came up with this technology using microbes and basically the memory boards. The acids can be broken down, placed into a tank, and let the bacteria do their stuff. And that recovers a lot more value. And obviously it's a lot more to sell into the market, and then obviously the commercials work out. So thanks to the bacteria, and it's all clean up.
I don't know if memory boards is the cue, but so tell us a bit more then about your journey to scale, where there's further steps ahead. But how have you sort of succeeded on that path, and what have been the big challenges, and what are the kind of big opportunities, if you like, to, if you went back 10 years and start again, that you might scale even quicker than we have?
I think, firstly, thank you for staying around, by the way. For us personally, we are an SME wanting to be a much bigger organisation and compete with the OEMs, primarily Dell, Lenovo and HP, and we're in the end user compute space, which is very relevant to circularity because mobiles and laptops are by design or by use probably very linear in their first life. So it's very referenceable for this conversation. We thought we could be the David to the Goliath back then when we started, and actually we got a lot of things wrong. But one of the things that we thought would happen when we'd invested in the technology, we'd invested into the factory, we sort of built ourselves up for mass production, when we thought that the world would be waiting outside our door to buy it. And actually the world wasn't waiting outside our door to buy it, far from that. But in fact, no one was waiting outside of our door to buy it.
build it and they will come.
That's what we thought, and there was a handling error. So the lesson we have to take is that, and I was speaking to Simon and those, is that I'm an idiot in that I'm in the business. Yeah, I'm a tech guy. I love tech. If a new tech comes along, I've got to have it. Even if I don't want it, I've got to have it. I'm that guy, but I'm in the business, so I can only kind of pretend that some of you probably are also idiots. So that wasn't our audience. And then we went into okay, well, if we can't see the supply chain, that the reseller market that people will sell through, like the OEMs will sell through, they will sell our product because their customers want it, because the signals were that policy was coming, that people would buy it. But they weren't interested because of the incentivization for the way goods are sold, electronic goods are sold in the world today. There's an incentivization wrapper that flows through the channel that sells to you, which actually takes all the control away from the buyer. It belongs not to you, it belongs to the people that made the technology that you buy. So we learned that valuable lesson. And then we figured out, okay, the only way we're going to make this work is to go around everybody and go and speak to the customers directly. So what happened was, we wanted a claw into Europe. We then went into Ireland, worked with them on what I call pre-market engagement. They then audited their public sector servants, and 15% of them had said, yeah, we would buy an alternative to new product. They then put a framework together, and we won that contract in collaboration with the local guy on the ground there. But the award was for 60,000 devices remanufactured from circular computing. That's what was really important, because it then kind of goes, it was not one or two, it's a sizable volume. 15% of market share is not believe it's a sizable volume. That award then gave confidence to DEFRA to go to market and go, we don't want to buy new as our primary strategy, we want to buy an alternative to all. And we won that award, and that was in 2012, last year. We started in September last year. So that was for 34,000 devices. Again, whether that number's big or not big is irrelevant to me. When you're not selling any, it's bloody enormous. We've just recently won a big utilities company for 26,000 devices. We've just then won a big share of a global retailer who wanted an alternative to new offering as well as new. So we kind of have a hybrid world. And all of a sudden, we're starting to kind of get big installations, because actually it's not the technology that is going to help us scale. It's confidence that people are not buying risk. So no one got fired for buying brand new kit. But the moment they go away from the norm and they go, this is wrong, then their job, their pension, and everything, their livelihoods are at risk, and that risk is too much for many to make the move. So what I would say is, my biggest lesson is, I thought that Steve was the person that should be buying circular computing products, and actually the consumer isn't our audience. Our audience is BT, our audience is the universities, those big users of IT, who then will put the device into the hands of the user, who will know that the product isn't new, and then they will say, do you know what, this is a good experience for me. And then all of a sudden things change.
And so, see, before you got to these kind of breakthrough procurement revenue opportunities, how did you fund the kind of, what was the pre-scale phase of your journey?
It came from shareholder funds. So we, as a mother company, we are one of the largest traders of redundant technology in the world. And so as a result of that, we were able to self-fund our journey into remanufactured laptops by being able to trade large volumes, 10s, 20, 30,000 in a regular volume, and then gradually build the circular computing run rate. So customers for us, our customers that come and say, I want to buy 10,000 and then go to deliver tomorrow. They're customers that say, we'll allow you to build your production to the rate we want to procure from you. So having a monthly or quarterly procurement with those big customers is important. But ultimately, it was funded by shareholder funds. It's been a very challenging and time-intensive journey with COVID in the middle of it, which was great at the very beginning and not so great at the very end, because at the very beginning, everybody wanted what you wanted, what you had it. And at the very end, nobody wanted what you had because they were full up. But we didn't know when it was going to stop. So we learned some lessons there. So ultimately, we had the engine to make profit awaiting our core activity at circular computing by trading second-hand technology in that world, which is actually a very mature world.
Yeah, it's a bit of a segue to you, maybe, because kind of what you do, really, isn't it, is help businesses kind of fund their way to scale, and the new strategy coming out of Innovate UK is really focused around, well, firstly, focus for certain areas of the economy that you really want to grow, but also it's finding those scalable solutions that you want to put more money more efficiently into those kind of businesses. So tell me about that and what the challenges, barriers are that you're trying to overcome in what you do.
Yeah, so those who haven't seen, kind of obviously Innovate UK, those who don't know, obviously still part of UKRI, but we're kind of the business-facing sort of research and innovation bit. So everything we fund has got to be a sort of business-led kind of aspect to it. But it's not all grants, and that's often where most people sort of see like sort of money. No, it's not just the money. It's
I was trying to simplify it for people.
certainly not the money. But yeah, there's been a sort of a new prospectus out, which is helping companies much more along that journey. So not saying they're going to disappear completely, but fewer of the kind of, here's a big open competition, anyone can sort of bid in, just do a little competition, and then, off you go and hope you do well. And more of a kind of a growth cohort approach. You might have seen there's been a pilot out about low carbon concrete, but it's an example of the kind of thing we're doing there. So it's more about sort of you get into a cohort, you kind of assess to get into that bit, and then it's offering you the right product at the right time to sort of help you on that journey to grow. So it might be a grant, but it might be a loan, or it might be access to private finance. So it's not sort of a fixed model really, and kind of on that. But some of the barriers kind of seen in the circularity space on growing, and I think it was quite interesting that I think Lisa picked up on some of these in sort of the meta thing earlier, and some of the things Steve's been saying as well. But there's particularly this kind of sharing of value across the system. It's often very easy to kind of do a project and say, look, I've got some value for me, I can see the potential for this, and then you roll it out, you try and get everybody involved. But actually, if it's disrupting somebody else's value, they go, well, actually, we don't want this. But also assume, you might, again, we've seen models that worked well in London, and then they've gone, right, let's roll this out across the UK. But we're not starting from a blank sheet of paper, and obviously circularity isn't a new thing, and it's often involved quite a lot from the third sector, charities, etc. And it's not a one-size-fits-all for every place across the UK. So you've got to be very sort of conscious of what already exists in that space. And actually, we had some interesting workshops with David Greenfield, actually talking about some of the stuff they do at Take Back there a couple of years ago, just looking at how you might do that. And it is that real kind of mapping of what's already on that system and what gaps do you need to fill in that space. And then, as I say, how do you actually share the value between all of those people? Otherwise, it's not going to be equitable, or it might just be downright refused as being a viable option.
Is it? Because one of the things that we did with yourselves, or with your help, was a 2-year pilot around the food system. And one of the outcomes for an innovator getting involved in this kind of blended, funded, supported consortium is they got the space to almost completely rethink their business. So a lot of startups at some point have to pivot from what their original idea is into a better idea. You gave this company the space, and a few months after the pilot finished, they raised 20 million in the Series A round. So it kind of works if you enable innovators to innovate through these pilots to get their idea refined. Then there's further funding can sort of follow into it. But collaboration and partnership is really hard. So really. So we got time actually. I'm useless at time, Russ. Just so you know. Dede, back to you, because you've put a lot of work into building partnerships, value chain level change. Because you're not a mining company. You're BT. So how have you been able to kind of build that strength and depth of partnerships to make this scale happen?
Okay. So I'll just keep it simple. Hopefully from what I had said earlier and what my colleagues here have alluded to is that there has to be something in the value chain for everybody, right? We had a big problem with a need to transform the network. We were sitting on a lot of value. We needed help to move it, shift it, and process it. So it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to take out that legacy infrastructure. Some of it is still prohibitive now. And we also then have to remember that we are critical national infrastructure responsible custodians. So some of the things that we've had to connect are not commercially viable for anybody else, right? Collecting all the Hebrides and all the islands, etc. So we had a big problem. We're sitting on a lot of value. We had to work in an ecosystem where everybody, you could help us, your academics, like I said, the universities, solve a problem. It needed funding. You can make money out of our waste. And in that value chain, everybody has something that they can make. And those products then feed into others. You know, somebody else takes our waste and does something else with it. We're remanufacturing with our plastics for open reach. So everybody has to benefit. The economics has to work in reality, and things would circulate a lot more if the money went round.
But I mean, it's
So that's what facilitates the scaling.
Yeah, it's truly an endeavour of our time. They're going to be teaching this at MBA school.
It's really exciting. I think that you are all in a really exciting industry.
So, Steve, we've got like 3 or 4 minutes left. Getting me over here. That's 90 seconds on procurement.
Procurement is going to change everything in this world really quickly, particularly in tech. There's some sort of Armageddon, the chip shortage. There is a critical supply problem, and there's a price increase, which affects particularly governments because they are having to do less and more with less money, and less ultimately. So procurement is the way forward. It will make the change. Then the banks and the funders will jump in because they can see that the value is not going to be not put to good use. So I believe that to be true. And the other stakeholders, the manufacturers, won't feel threatened because their customers are behaving in a normal way. And life will change, but it requires that level of confidence. Circularity isn't a thing it's driven by sustainability. It's driven by commercial outcomes, like you said. And the premium and the dividend is where sustainability comes in. That's then the winner. And probably when we started the other way around, we believed everyone would go for it because it's better carbon. That isn't the case. People behave differently and people think differently. And if you can align circularity with commercial outcomes that are positive, you get the environmental and the economical benefits to boot, and everybody wins.
Amy, give you the last say on this. So given the new strategy from Innovate UK, focus on scale, focus on certain sectors, what's the big thing you want to see happen in a bigger time frame, 5 years? What's that going to be? Give us a bit of hope here about what it's going to be. The eternal pessimist, give us some hope.
I've got today. It's hard to say. I mean, I just hope that, we might not see as many sort of calls that have got explicitly sort of circularity in the title. I mean, there are, with the exception of programs like Climates, which is the one that Francis mentioned, which is focused on sort of rare earth elements and recovery of those. But just now we're kind of in the background, that sort of making sure circularity is embedded in kind of all the programs that we do, and trying to make sure that we're kind of not just pushing for new tech for the sake of it, pushing for it to be in the right place. And hoping that, as say, circularity is at the design phase and not just as this thing we think about at the end with waste. And I was going to say, where I've seen circularity done at its best is that not diving into it and then going, right, we've got a problem to clear up here, is actually just giving people the time to stop and think and go, oh, actually, is there a solution here where we don't produce waste at all? Or we're only applying this thing here? Or I like the researcher that kind of mentioned about sort of efficiency of data is actually maybe you need to use a bit of AI up front to kind of set kind of where there's sort of common answers, but then you don't need to use AI to keep sort of getting those common answers out.
Future says no, it doesn't have the answer, but it's a big contribution.
So my hope is AI is a part in quite a lot of innovations, but it's not just seen as the default answer to everything.
Yeah. Well, so hopefully that was an insightful dive into the challenge of scale. It's been a privilege to be on the stage with the three of you. I think you bring together the kind of the capability of a business like BT with the innovation that you bring, Steve, with this sort of underpinning of sort of the ability to bring people together that Innovate UK has. I mean, we can actually gives me quite a bit of hope. It's always nice to finish a sustainability session like this on an air of optimism and hope and inspiration. So thank you very much.
We didn't get any questions specifically about scaling, but I guess a couple of interesting ones. So, first, which country's approach to circular economy could we learn from in your area?
One of the kind of earliest lessons I had 20 odd years ago, actually working with Adam when he was at M&S, we kind of posed this question, and a chap who ran an amazing restaurant in London, Michelin sort of level, grown up in India, and he said, look, you talk about circular this and Schwepping and what have you. I grew up learning to be resourceful. Nothing went to waste. So at one level, the answer to your question is go back to countries where you have to and learn from them. And let's not think we're too clever in what we're doing, because there's some people that are out there that sort of live it every day. There's a slightly philosophical answer, so maybe hand over to Amy for a better one.
Not going to do a perfect one here, but sort of more an interesting one. I took a cohort of companies out to Japan a couple of years ago to look at sort of circular economy opportunities and sort of parallels. And I think it's one of those ones where kind of on the surface you go, wow, they do things so much better. I mean, they've got the highest level of sort of pre-recycling sorting out of anything. You look at, you think kind of our 3 or 4 bins is something, and they sort things by house up about 10 different things. And you go, gosh, they must really have circular economy kind of sorted. But then you look at the manufacturing side and actually trying to get those materials back into manufacturing. It's a real challenge for them because all the Kanban and all the processes for efficient manufacturing means using pure, reliable materials at every stage. So they have a real problem going, we've got all these nicely sorted materials, but we're not actually sort of integrating them back into manufacturing. So thinking about a kind of interesting, different, better in some ways, but still lots of challenges. There's a lot to learn from that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
What would you say the most impactful example of innovation is that you've experienced in the last 12 months? Briefly, 30 seconds.
I think my favourite innovator, we invested in two scientists out of Cambridge that had come up with a technology to 3D print onto cellulose and chitin. And they can recreate colour the way nature does. So it's basically printing butterfly wings. And Son McCartney is making a dress out of sequins made from this material. So that's more about biocircular, but there's a fascinating era ahead of us, I think, around bioinnovation, biosynthesis, bioremediation. And we heard the bioleaching example from BT. That stuff really, really excites me, that we can skip to better materials and adapting materials through this kind of innovation. Very, very excited about that.
I was going to do a textiles one, but I'll do one that I found quite interesting just in the last couple of years, but more on kind of systems change. So there was a project which we did provide a grant with through the previous NICER program that I know a lot of researchers here are involved with, a company called WEFT. And I thought they did a really interesting thing, because they were just looking at how do you get the extended producer responsibility system working well in practice. And they were focused on textiles, but it's a kind of an applicable thing for any sector. And I know electronics is one that obviously is sort of encountering this particular regulation in different places. And theirs was kind of how do you get all the stakeholders sat around looking at a model to go,
where's it best to put the benefits of the system? Because if it's just, oh, we'll add 10p to the cost of an item, that doesn't really change behaviour. Or if the consumer gets 10p back after giving something back, again, it's not enough to make a difference. But if you channel all that money into building up repair functionality, actually that has a big impact on the system, because that's one of the reasons why people don't keep things longer in use. So yeah, if any people or stakeholders are wondering how to sort of get extended producer responsibility done better, they've got a great system that they're kind of trying to roll out now and get used in lots of different sectors.
Thank you so much. One last round of applause, please.